Hey everyone, back with you with the Lookout Wildfire Report. If you're just joining us for the first time, welcome. My name is Zeke Lunder. I'm a wildfire analyst, and I've been working in fire technology since 1999. I spent a lot of time in my career working for the incident command teams that run major wildfires. And I don't do that anymore, but now I use a lot of the tips and tricks and tools I learned and experience I gained in the last 30 years in fire to run this wildfire education channel. So tonight we're going to look at the Palisades Fire. If you've been following along, we're going to refer back to stuff we've been talking about. And if you're just joining us, I hope you keep following because we kind of build upon a story here day by day. We came to you last night to talk about the fire kind of blowing up in the Tanga Canyon area, the Palisades Fire. We're not going to talk much about the Eaton Fire just because it seems to be pretty much done. I know it's only been called 15% contained, but I don't see really anything going on over there. On the intel that I have, I don't have great intel. I've been focused mainly on Palisades, but pretty sure that Eaton is pretty secure right now. So we're going to focus on Palisades. We've been focused on Palisades on the kind of northeast corner, the area between Topanga Canyon and the 405, and especially in the kind of far northeast corner where the fire was most active last night and today. So without much further ado, we're going to jump into the map interp and just talk about, fly around on our fancy map and talk about what we're seeing. All right, so here's the fire, the big picture of the Palisades Fire. I keep forgetting the parts of it end up behind my talking head here. We've got Malibu kind of down in the bottom corner here. We've got Santa Monica over on this end. We've got the 405 running up through here. And we got two logos on the map. What are we going to do about that? All right. And just to refresh, as we do each day, fire started up here kind of around the Summit neighborhood. It was blowing downhill with strong northeast winds, meaning that they're coming out of the northeast. So north is at the top of the map, east is over here. So northeast winds means they're coming this way. So they kind of blasted down into Pacific Palisades, spread out here, and then made their way the first night all the way to Malibu, where they stopped when they hit the Franklin Fire, shown here in blue. Franklin Fire burned in November, and so that was extinguished and didn't do a terrible amount of damage in Malibu. And then that created this nice, what we call catcher's mitt, that has protected Malibu from this fire. So going around this fire, there's been a little bit of action over here still around Montanito, but I'm going to talk a bit about how these colors work here. We've got the red is the entire perimeter of the fire. It's the entire extent of what we have mapped using the variety of data, but mainly perimeters flown by the California Office of Emergency Services and the National Interagency Fire Center. So red is what's new. Blue outline here is where the fire was last night at midnight. And then white is where the outline was this morning around 6 or 7 a.m. So what we like to look for is where are there places where there's red outside of our white line? Because remember, the white line is where the fire was this morning. So looking as far as this mapping goes, we don't see any new red all the way from over here off Piuma Road all the way over around past Topanga. Doesn't mean there wasn't any spread there, but if there was, it's not on the mapping that we have. And we haven't heard much action anywhere pretty much to the west of Topanga or Topanga Canyon. So the interesting part for the fire right now is and has been for the last 36 hours, this kind of northeast flank or corner. One thing that we have out here is this blue blob that we haven't been showing. I didn't realize that it was there, but this is the Palisades Fire, which burned about 2 square miles in 2021. So basically you have 3-year-old brush here, and that has really slowed the spread of the fire. We were wondering why, when we were watching their firing operations kind of progress. Basically, they've built a box of fire line around this part of the fire, and they've been gradually filling in that box with fire, what we call firing operations. And I was wondering this morning why we didn't see the firing continuing on that major ridge system. It turns out because there's a 3-year-old burn there, and they can't get it to burn, or they didn't need to because the fire has kind of crept into there and stopped spreading. Anyway, behind this blue here you see is the edge of the fire. So coming up out of Topanga, this is all, doesn't look like it's moved today. On the other end of the fire, there was a bulldozer and retardant line that was put in 2 days ago down this ridge between Sullivan Canyon and Mandeville Canyon. Last night, the fire burned up out of Sullivan Canyon, crossed over this was kind of their primary box or containment line. Crossed that, and last night we came on because we were worried that all this fire that was out here last night, and that's the blue, it's the perimeter from last night at midnight, we were worried that today's winds would bring that down in a really kind of, had the potential to come down in a very uncontrolled and destructive way into Crestwood Hills here. That doesn't seem to have happened today. This perimeter here is about 3:30 p.m. and we haven't really seen any intel that suggests that there's been a huge amount of fire spread down in. You can see that the fire has backed down into Mandeville Canyon and down into where the homes are, and kind of stopped short of the homes. And that's due to a really aggressive attack today by all sorts of aircraft. There's a huge amount of firefighting resources in Southern California right now for these fires. And as this quadrant of the fire has been the most active, they've had all the resources that they've needed. And so that's been a really good, successful day, it sounds like, as far as we know. In that it hasn't, from the white line to the red line is what it did basically during daylight hours today. So the only kind of hiccup that we see so far is, as we've talked about, there's kind of a control box that's going to be built around this whole part of it, and it's really important to try to hold the fire when you can on major ridge systems. And what appears to have happened this afternoon is that the fire did cross the primary control line here, kind of. I'll have to pull up something that's got a little more reference, but here's Sylvia Park. And so up at the top of the drainage, kind of above Sylvia Park, it does appear that the fire crossed this primary line. So they hit it really hard with air tankers and helicopters, and they kind of subdued that. But unless they can get crews in to kind of dig line along the entire edge of this that's in this kind of heavy brush, hasn't burned for a long time, it's not going to be fully controlled. And that's probably not going to happen, I would guess, just based on the topography and everything. I don't know. I might be wrong about them getting crews in here, but I think that it's probably not going to happen. I think that they're going to continue to bomb it with aircraft, but they're also going to be building contingency line out here on farther ridges. I'm sure they already are. So they've got a lot of resources, and the nice thing about an offshore wind is that this is the windward side of the fire, and so it gives you better visibility for aircraft. If the wind was blowing from the coast, the fire would be spreading this way, but also it would be too heavy with the smoke oftentimes to have safe aircraft operations. So that's the fact that it's crossed that line has made a lot more work for firefighters to keep the fire on the coast side of the Santa Monica Mountains. So we'll keep following this. That's an interesting thing about these big fires is these stories unfold over the course of days, and firefighters always have what's called PACE. You got the primary, alternate, and contingency plans, and then E is kind of the emergency, like everything else failed. So this was their P, primary line. Their alternate line is going to be probably to have to come out to the next ridge system. But they've got a lot of aircraft, and they might be able to really knock it down to where they actually can use crews. But when things are all said and done, crews have to get out and go along the edge of the fire and make sure it's out. You can't really, aircraft don't put out fires in steep, inaccessible country unless the fires are really small. So a little visual on that, and a good op-ed here from a couple of our smartest fire people. This is Topanga Canyon camera, and starting at about noon, and this is where we're going to see that fire. This is where it slops over. So this is the ridge, the primary ridge that they wanted to hold it on, and then this is the fire kind of not doing what they wanted it to. So you see the tanker drops, you see the fire, it's kind of backing. But you can see from the flame lengths in here, like when we talk about why you can't just put hand crews in on steep, inaccessible, super vegetated slopes, it's just that the fire behavior in these mature chaparral stands can be really severe. And it's not safe to put people down in the hole there under most circumstances. You know, we talked about at night, sometimes you get a break and the fire lays down and a lot of work can get done. But this is really difficult terrain for hand crews to produce in, right? Because if you're in 8-foot tall solid brush and you're cutting in a hand line, all that brush you cut has got to get stuffed somewhere. Like, imagine just hacking your way through a jungle of brush, and your job is to remove the fuel. And so what do? You have to stuff all this brush into the other side, and it's incredibly difficult, steep, nasty ground to try to be a landscaper, ditch digger in. So retardant's really good for slowing fires down, but in the meantime they've got to work on their other box, and their job just got harder. Let's see. The Wilshire camera has been a good view of, and these big giant flames are something that's from like yesterday or something, so don't be worried about that. But just kind of smoked in there in Santa Monica, and can't really see much going on. But they've had good access and worked really hard on this Mandeville Canyon side today. It's not out of the woods yet, and just that. When we're looking up in here, if they can get the fire, if they can kind of manage it and have it back down to the bottom here and potentially even help it get to the bottom, by firing this behind these homes, that's how we control fires, is if we can either, sometimes the fire's backing down. We don't like if the fire is, if this part of the fire backs down and the rest hasn't, then there's potential for the fire to kind of make a run. And so oftentimes what crews will work on as a fire backs down a hill is, shooting flares out in here, or like incendiary kind of sparklers, basically to call it square it up. So, try to bring the fire down the hill in an even manner. But basically, if this fire can back down to the bottom of the canyon here, and they can protect the structures as that happens, then they can kind of have it secured along that road. And the problem is just that if we get kind of another kind of onshore push, you can get, a little torching goes on or a flare up, and then if stuff gets on the other side here, it just runs to the top incredibly quickly. So that's basically what happened over here last night. Was the fire was down in the bottom here, it crossed, it made a run up the top, and then it came down this way, and then it made its way back. Right, so it's kind of textbook. Your fire gets to the bottom, you can't hold it at the road, it runs up the other side, and now you've got to go to the next ridge system out. So hopefully tonight they're able to kind of button it up along this bottom of Mandeville Canyon. And if they can do that and kind of tie that work into, like right now the fire is kind of hung up on this ridge, which was the original kind of control plan, was hold it here. So this part is up to this ridge now, and that's good. Like if they can keep that corner and secure this edge down to the road, then this flank will be done. But if they lose it anywhere along this canyon tonight, then they're out to the next ridge. We got stickers. If you become a subscriber on PayPal, you'll get a sticker. I promise. I promise everyone who's already a subscriber too that you're going to get one. But I didn't send out Christmas cards this year, and I didn't send out Lookout letters yet either. But I know that I owe all Lookout subscribers new stickers, and we've got some really, really cool new ones that we'll be mailing as soon as we stop chasing our tail with these fires. Okay, so we're going to jump now. That kind of wraps up our current situation status for this fire. I'm going to zoom over to Eaton just so no one can say that we didn't talk about it. But we don't really have any new intel here on Eaton. This is the new flight that was on the National Fire Service perimeter site today. And when we look at the heat satellites here, which are kind of our like what's new course scale view, all the yellow means that it's older than 24 hours since there's been heat in that square. We see a little bit of red squares way at the top here by Eaton Saddle, San Gabriel Peak. And as we talked about before, this fire kind of ran into the Bobcat fire. This whole area blue is only 4 years old, so not very flammable at all. And pretty much this fire kind of went out with pretty minimal firefighting. Once it got up once the wind wasn't blowing us up here, there wasn't a lot of kind of direct attack on this fire. And sometimes that happens. Like the conditions are such that a fire won't burn very well without a lot of wind. And so sometimes the fire just puts itself out. And this one, there was good firefighting that went on, I'm sure, but there was also a lot of steep ground where the fire just kind of burned to the top and ran into another burn. So when you hear they say that like this fire is only 15% contained, like in essence, it's already contained on this entire flank by Bobcat. There might be places where it can get in there and burn in some accumulations. But, you know, another thing we like to look at is just like what was the burn severity of the Bobcat fire? And so, and this program I use here is Google Earth Pro. And Google Earth Pro is pretty neat. It's a free program. And you can turn on like historical imagery. So if we go here to like this burned in 2020, right? So you can see all this area out here burned hot. And a lot of the area here along the ridge, it burned hot on the south aspects, like facing the sun. And then some of these areas, there's still vegetation. And oftentimes that's just a function of, you know, maybe they lit a backfire along here that backed down here gently and burned up the surface fuel. But you see this landscape here after the Bobcat fire is like half the landscape's completely denuded of, at least half is, there's just no vegetation there following the fire. So that's why we say that these burns kind of create opportunities to catch large fires. And they also create opportunities to do prescribed burning. You know, like in a landscape like this, if you have a wildfire that only burns hot on the south-facing slopes, that next winter or fall might be a great time to burn this pocket here of fuel that didn't burn in the wildfire. You know, oftentimes there's unburned pockets and other places that you can burn with lower risk of escape because they're surrounded by a bunch of black from a recent burn. Similarly, the station fire burned all the area to the north of this fire. So here's an image from the year after the station fire. And you can see that it's just, there's no vegetation. Like there's some vegetation down in the riparian, but all the chaparral on station, like it got really roasted. So that's why this fire doesn't have a lot to burn there. You've got 15-year-old brush, but a lot of that brush at 15 years old doesn't have a lot of what we call a dead component. Like, it takes a long time for brush to kind of mature and die. And so when you have a completely slicked off landscape and you grow a bunch of fresh brush, a lot of that doesn't die for the first 15 years. So, and green brush is a lot less flammable than old, tall, what we call decadent brush that's full of dead twigs. So that's kind of our summary for Eaton. Is we don't have a lot of great intel, but the landscape is already kind of limited here fuel-wise in its ability to like have a, the reason we could have a station fire here in 2009 was based a lot on, like, here's the station fire. It was huge, right? But if you look at the previous decades before that, you hadn't had a big fire out there since 1975, right? So 24 years without a large fire, and that was long enough for the fuel. Let's see, 2009. 30 years, right? It's 34 years from the time we had this big fire until we had the station fire, with no other big fires out there. So that's why you have a station fire, is because you had a landscape that had been kind of deprived of fire, that had a lot of decadent brush. So when we talk about the fire history, the places that you need to worry about are the places that haven't had a fire in the last 40 years. So when we look over here at the fire that we got right now, we're in one of those places, right? Like here where they're doing their firing operation. Like no fires for, sorry, I got too many layers. Like no big fires in this area since 1978, right? Almost as old as me, right? And so that's what gives us the potential in the landscape. But like when we're writing fire plans, we're looking at this kind of stuff. We're on the landscape. Haven't you had a big fire for a very long time? Bel Air, Beverly Hills. There's not that many places really on this whole landscape that have had as few fires in the last 60 years as where this fire is currently burning. So if you're just joining us and you want the current situation, I recommend just go back to the beginning of the live stream, and that's where we covered it. And I should have a little notice up here, because we're going to keep talking. We're going to keep kind of geeking out a little on other stuff. So, but yeah, if you want to get the skinny, I'm going to add a note here. All right. Okay. So I want to jump to a different topic here. We're going to talk about fire maps and fire mapping. There's a wide variety of maps that get produced on fires, and these are some of the ways that we gather our information on what's happening. So I just want to show some examples and talk about how you read a fire map. This is a map of the Eaton Fire. And basically, we break the fires up into divisions and branches. And the thinking behind that is that, as far as we call it span of control. is that you don't want to have like 50 people all coming to the fire boss, the incident commander, and saying, what am I doing? What am I supposed to do? Where do I go? Instead, the incident commander has an operations section chief. And the operations section chief is in charge of all the firefighting equipment. They work for one person. But that person, operations, they have 5 branches working for them here. So they divide the fire into 5 kind of segments. And these kind of brackets here, the square brackets, are branch breaks. And so then if you're, then that branch has divisions working for them. So branch 10 here has division D, G, and H. Those division group supervisors then have hand crews, engines, water tenders working for them. And so that's a good way to make sure that no one supervisor has to deal with more than, say, 5 direct reports. That division might have 100 resources working for them, but those resources will be working for a strike team leader or a task force leader or another configuration. So it's just an expandable way of maintaining organization. On this fire, the black line for Eden is where they're calling it contained. So they've checked through these neighborhoods where the black line is, and they're like, okay, these houses are out, they're not going to spread anymore. These red areas are areas where there's still enough heat out there that they're not ready to say that it's contained. When it's contained, it means they don't need to patrol it. They don't need firefighters to go to that neighborhood. But as long as there's like potential for fires to keep going, etc., they will keep it red on the map. Like we said, the fire is basically out up here where it's hit the Bobcat fire. All the way through, there's like very little heat. But they're not ready to call it contained because they haven't been able to kind of get eyes on it and make sure that there's not some, little finger of unburned fuel out here in the Bobcat that could carry the fire. But in practical terms, much of this fire is contained up in the mountains just by the topography and the fire scar. So that's the pilot's map. So when we're running the mapping shop, we're making all these different products every night. We map the fire, we map where it's contained, where it's not, we map the divisions and everything, and then once we have that mapping done, then we start making other products. So one of the main products is the operations map, and this map goes to basically all the overhead. So all the division group supervisors get a big paper copy of this map, the branch directors. Individual firefighters, not so much, and even crew bosses, they get like kind of a photocopied atlas. But same thing, get your branches, you got your divisions, and then all these little blue dots here are what are called drop points. And drop points are kind of like logistically oriented. So it'd be like a road intersection or, a place that several roads come together in the woods. Somewhere that's big enough that you can kind of turn around a truck, park some vehicles for a briefing, and also it's a drop point. So you can bring out a truck with a bunch of fire hose to drop point 21 and drop it off there, and then people in that division can come. And it's kind of like the social hub also. It's where you go to get your lunches or, hey, meet me at drop point 22. So it's a reference point, and it's these are kind of controlled by the logistics people. On this map, you can see this H, this series of H's going up the hill. That's hand line. So that's basically line that's been cut by crews on foot. And maybe it's a trail already. Maybe they're cutting it for the first time. But basically, if you're building a hand line, you're building a trail through the woods. You're scraping down to bare dirt and clearing all the dead trees along it that could fall over the line. If you see the R here, that's road that's being prepped as a line. So that's your operations map. Here's a pilot map of the Palisades Fire. I think what's interesting about this is just like when I'm watching this flight radar, it's just a miraculous kind of choreography going on of you've got air tankers, you've got helicopters, and they're all operating in this kind of chaotic, confined area without crashing into each other, flying at low level elevation, dropping mud on a fire in turbulent weather and winds. So when people say like, "Hey, how come they're not flying?" I know it's windy, but other airplanes are flying. It's kind of crazy enough that they make this all work. in perfectly smooth conditions, but then when you've got, smoke and turbulence and high winds, and you're trying to coordinate, 10 different aircraft, it's insane that they managed to pull it off at all. So here they've got these flight routes that are kind of like, hey, if you're going to fly from this side of the fire to the other side, you're going to go through a specific route, the coast route. And a lot of this is just for them to have a common orientation. Hey, you're going to fly down the 101 route, means you're going to follow the highway. These maps, we usually put power lines on there, radio towers, other stuff that you wouldn't want to fly a plane into. And then they'll have the water sources too, because a lot of the helicopters are operating off of, a certain dip or something. These are laid out so they can be folded up and put on a knee board on a helicopter pilot, or else now it's usually someone straps an iPad to their leg, and they can see where they are on this map as a blue dot. Oftentimes we'll make fire history maps. We've got kind of a standard data set for the whole state that shows where fires have been. These are helpful for the kind of fire behavior analysts and other folks that are kind of planning the tactics and the big picture. And so in this case, you know that like this fire is probably not going to burn. If it did get a big wind event that changed and blew it this way, we've kind of got a box defined in that the Woolsey fire here has reduced the fuels greatly in this entire region. So this is kind of a big picture kind of informational map for the people that are making tactical decisions. So back to our conversation here about what's going on with the tactical plan for how this is all going to get wrapped. We'll throw back on our retardant lines here. So over the several days, painted this retardant, painted the top of this ridge to prepare the dozer line for firing. The fire kind of pushed and exceeded their expectations, and this went out the window, and now they've got dozer line out here. So when we look at our operations map, using what we've just learned, we've got on this fire, we've got branch 10 and branch 1 and division Alpha and division Zulu. There's a kind of an order to how these things get named. So the fire started out in here, kind of right around the Summit neighborhood. And so from the get-go, you start labeling your divisions alphabetically, clockwise, and from the top of the alphabet down, counterclockwise. And that's so if the fire keeps growing, you can add letters. So if the fire, it keeps burning this way, and you're like, oh man, we're already out of divisions. Like, oh, let's call this division F. We'll add division Golf and then hotel. So anyway, division A has been where the action is. You can see that they had prepped these X lines are bulldozer lines that have been put in by Caterpillar dozers. And so you can see that they prepped this road, Sullivan Canyon Road, and they managed to hold it all the way to the top as the fire backed down. But then they weren't able to hold on to it at the top, and this is where it squirted out, went over the West Mandeville Fire Road, and came down the other side. So this map is what is based on the intel they had last night at midnight when they went to press. So now they've got, now that the fire's been out here in Mandeville Canyon, there's a bunch of dozer line now that's already been done, that was done before last night, down here along the lower east Mandeville Fire Road, Canyon Back Road, all the way up to the top where it's what we call tied in on the unpaved part of Mulholland Drive. These dashed pink and yellow lines are gas pipelines, and that's just something that's good to know about if you're out there with, earth moving equipment. So a lot of dozer line, and then out here is where the fire crossed. Division Zulu is basically now where they've got kind of the problems with the fire on the wrong side of the ridge. So right now it doesn't show any dozer line out kind of around Sylvia Park, but that doesn't mean it isn't done. One thing that has always been true is that dozers move faster than the map people can keep up. And it's oftentimes in the past hasn't been on the dozers people's radar to like be mapping as they go. They're just out there pushing dirt through dust, trying not to run over firefighters and trying not to get burned up by the fire. So usually there's a lot more dozer line on the ground than ends up on the map. This end of the fire, they're showing containment all the way up here from the bottom up to the top of the hill above Malibu. And that's just because we got the Franklin fire here that didn't make it onto their map. So that's about it for us now. We'll jump, before we get off here, we'll jump back onto some of the intel sites and just see if there's any new comments from anyone that's following the radio traffic. But that's kind of your Fire Intel 101. These maps, they've got a lot of information on them, and they're updated every single day. Even though we're in the digital mapping revolution, the paper map is still in use. Oftentimes because you guys know how bad the internet has been, like in some of these areas. And so in a lot of places where we're dealing with fire disasters, there's still not great cell coverage. And people really prefer to get maps digitally on their phones and everything now, but phone batteries go dead. If you're out on a 16-hour shift, like you got a whole crew that's trying to figure out where to like plug in their iPhones at night and everything else. So paper maps still have a place. Paper's not dead. Digital maps are great, and they're getting adopted a lot, but things like battery life and everything else, and sometimes just not having cell. I mean, another thing that is a big deal during disasters, as many of you are probably experiencing, is once you displace 100,000 people, the bandwidth needs of an area change. And if we're in Happy Camp, California, that already had really crappy internet, and then we bring in 1,000 firefighters, and you've got 300 off-duty firefighters in their tents watching movies on their phones, it can drag the bandwidth of the entire region down, making using the internet for mapping difficult. So in the past, we could do all this mapping without any internet. We relied on it's changing a lot now, but it's still one of these concerns with these disasters is just bandwidth and connectivity. Someone was asking about us doing more weather forecasts, and it's true. We need to get more on that as far as telling you what's coming next. There's lots of weather resources on the internet, and we can't always fit it all in. There's a live community meeting going on right now, according to Watch Duty, and there's a video update via Watch Duty about what's going on in Mandeville Canyon. Where's my fire weather? There it is. Okay, we're going to check out our fire weather forecast for Santa Monica Mountains. Okay, here's weather forecast from 2 p.m. Red flag warning continues. High confidence and long duration critical fire weather conditions through at least Tuesday and likely through Wednesday for the Santa Ana wind corridor. Gusts of 50 and 75 in wind-prone mountains and foothills, at least through Tuesday. Strongest winds likely tonight into Sunday, and again late Monday into Tuesday. It'll be very dry. Humidities are at critical levels. Thinking that there's at least a brief break for extreme fire weather conditions, likely by Friday. Tonight, ridgetop winds 20 to 30 with gusts to 50, becoming 25 to 40 with gusts to 60. Important thing to remember is that a lot of the critical burning periods have been at night. So we can't let our guard down about what might happen after sunset on the Palisades Fire. So if you are in those evacuation areas out to the west, or south of the fire. There's a reason that the evacuations are still holding, is that there's still that potential here for those strong winds to blow this up and bring it down into Brentwood. So that's about what we got. If you haven't checked it out already, we had an interview last night with Tim Chavez. Just a really incredible fire scholar. And we've put the full transcript of that up here on the Lookout. We've embedded the interview here, and then got the full transcript. Really interesting. Tim Chavez is a treasure, and we're glad to get him on here. So recommend you check that out on the Lookout, and also recommend that you check out our earlier broadcasts. We also did a feature today on how hard it is to mitigate wildfire hazards in the urban interface. There's an op-ed today in the LA Times from some folks who've thought a lot about this, who are a little, they're saying that it could have been mitigated. And it could have. Anything's possible. But I think where I'm coming from on the impossibility is just the reality of getting people to, at this scale, to work together to enact major structural changes in how our towns are built and how our lands are managed. So anyway, this is just kind of a quick article that I put together because I was on CNN today to talk about this stuff, and they've never heard of Zoom, and so I couldn't share my screen. So I had to send them some pictures. So I just made this, but I think check it out. It's not, I wouldn't say super hopeful, but I think it's pretty clear-eyed. And then we have our previous reports are all on here. So make sure you check out the Lookout. While you're there, check out QTAC. This is our main sponsor, and if you're in the fire business, they make incredible equipment. I've been using it on prescribed burns for years. This is actually this footage is actually shot on a burn that we did here in Bidwell Park in Chico. They make trucks from scratch on Ford chassis. And you can check out all their stuff on our website. But QTAC's, they're great, and we're glad to have them as a sponsor. With that, tomorrow Sunday morning, if I'm not on tomorrow first thing, it's because there's nothing crazy going on. If I wake up and check things and there's craziness, I'll come on and talk to you. If not, I got to catch up on sleep and take care of all the rest of the things that are involved. Keeping the life going. Appreciate y'all. Thanks for your support. Thanks for your donations. If you want to support us, make sure you check out links on our website to become a PayPal subscriber. Bye.